why am I sneaking around? Is it not obvious? I broke away from my confinement and now I'm on the run. I need to gather my remaining belongings from the inn and move to another kingdom. Why must you always appear in the worst of times? Sometimes I think you are not human. Perhaps you are not. I jest. I can see all and can tell you are hooked to my tales and want to hear more. Very well. With a giant feather given to me by my rescuer, I shall tickle the veil open with finesse so that we can view our mysterious duo of Ramble Shamble.
Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ramble Shamble. Today we're going to be talking about an episode that we mentioned a couple of months ago because we didn't really get the chance to expand upon it. Granted, it was inside a Ramble Shrapnel episode, hence my confusion in the beginning there. But we're going to do so today because we just realized it was too big a topic and there were too many different ways in which our directions could lead. And we wanted to elaborate a bit more on the points that we were talking about. So who was I talking to back then? It was, of course, the one and only Mackie.
Hello. I got a new mic. I hope this sounds a little bit better. I'm still adjusting settings and things, but we'll see how things go on.
Yeah. And why exactly did you decide to get a new one?
I thought I feel like we're at the stage where our recordings and of the podcast is getting something it'll be a fun hobby. And I just wanted to upgrade the mic quality, just get something that's a little bit clearer for the mic settings that I'm dealing with, because I edit quite a few of the Ramble Shamble episodes. And it's nice to get that clearer sense of like we are progressing, we are growing as a podcast. This is purely out of my own pocket, so don't fret, people, audience. We are not at that stage where Patreon is a thing. But yes, it's something that I just thought, hey, I saw this great deal for both a headset and a very popular mic and I decided to say, hey, I'm going to splurge and upgrade, have a better recording mic, because it seems like this will be a fun hobby to keep up with.
Yeah, that's great, man. It's always a nice bump up whenever you feel like, well, it's always great whenever the things you get are things that you actually care about.
Agreed.
And I think that's actually something that a lot of people don't really pay attention to nowadays, because the online marketplaces are so easy to just acquire new things with that we don't really think about, do I actually need this thing?
Oh, 100%.
I do it myself sometimes as well. Like I'll be shopping around on a website called Tickle in South Africa.
Yeah.
And you need to spend 500 Rand for free delivery. So I will buy something that's like 350 Rand. And then I'm like, I could spend 80 Rand on delivery, or I can get something else to get me past that threshold that I might not need right now, but in the future it could really help. So then like I end up getting something that's not entirely useful, but I mean, at least I got that backup.
Oh, 100%. And look, this mic was a pure want than need, because when we started the podcast, mic was never on my to-do list. I did YouTube previously, and I kind of fell away because it was something that it became too much of a job, and I wasn't enjoying my games anymore. But ever since I started podcasting with you, Jotun, it just made things fun again. It made things like, it's not a job, it's more a side hobby. Things to kind of share our ideas, share our opinions, and kind of grow and see if maybe we can get like-minded people to join along our ventures. We already got other podcasts at T, and who knows, we might be big time podcaster later down the line.
Yeah, true that. Yeah, like I actually also struggle a bit with that, what you were saying, where it was starting to feel like a job or something.
Mm-mm.
Just because I'm the type of person that I don't really chat or talk if I'm watching a series or a movie or playing a game with someone. Like I like to just fully immerse myself in the experience. So for me to do a voiceover while playing a game or something feels a bit weird. Like I haven't come to the point where it feels like work, thank goodness, but
No,
it just
100%.
it feels odd thinking aloud, you know.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's something that you definitely get experience with, but I think there's two types of like YouTubers. The ones that voice over their game, but I think the one that which gets a lot more popularity.
I thought you were gonna say I thought you were gonna say the type that pee in the shower and the type that don't.
Oh heck no, no. I think we.
Or what do people say? The type that pee in the shower or liars. I think the joke is.
No, that's very true.
Anyway, yeah.
No. I was just saying that I think it also seems like popularity-wise, I think, audience, if you don't know, we do have a YouTube channel called Ramble Shamble. It has quite a few videos that you can go check it on. But I think what's a little bit more natural is when you play in a co-op game. Like our Deep Rock Galactic episode was quite a fun episode to edit, but also it's just natural. It's not like you forced yourself to talk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. But that's also why it's a bit easier when you're playing with friends and stuff, because then there's already that level of want or needing to engage with the other person that you're playing with. Whereas if you're just by yourself, then it feels a bit weird for me.
Oh, very true. So true.
Yeah. But anyway, that's got absolutely nothing to do with our topic. A few months ago in a Ramble Shrapnel episode, we talked about, we were meant to be talking about something to do with alien encounters, which was part of episode 11. No, episode 12. So if you guys are interested in what we were doing over there, check out episode 12 earlier in this playlist and sate your curiosity. But in that Ramble Shrapnel episode, the bonus episode, we decided to take a hard left and just talk about the idea of not the first contact with aliens, but aliens already being among us. And that's the topic that we're going to expand upon today. Now, Mackie, I don't know if you remember exactly what you mentioned or what your idea was, because we were talking about what not the ideal situation, but what we think is the most likely situation in which aliens would be living amongst us already. I think I remember my one, like it had to do with alien hybrid programs and such. But do you remember what yours was?
Look, I think mine was. I don't actually think I had like a specific way that they were living amongst us. I think I just talked about the ways that they could. Is that they either like possess us, like take over our bodies and observe us. Oh no, I remember my idea. They're observers. They watching us. They viewing us like through like a fishbowl, and they like obviously they can interact with us, but they're more like 4-dimensional beings looking into a 3-dimensional world where they're seeing there's such a primitive state of civilization going through the gun era, the Stone Age era, then the industrial era, and they're just watching, and like we're just like some sitcom show where the families at homes are just like eating their space popcorn and laughing at our idiotic ways of doing things, and they say, haha, they hired that man to be president of the United States, ha ha ha, that man's starting a war, such a primitive way of thinking, ha ha ha.
Yeah, but that actually makes me think, because I was thinking earlier today about our one episode on the multiverse and space and time, and time being just like one of 3 dimensions of time. Sorry, this has absolutely nothing to do with today's episode, but just because you mentioned it's over there, I think the reason why physicists tend to think that extra dimensions will be extra dimensions of space and not necessarily of time is because time feels inherently different to us than the other
true.
dimensions.
Mm.
But I think that's just an illusion, because time is the only dimension that we experience that we don't have control over. And I think the instant that we could control time, at least in the x-axis, would mean that we perceive it as a dimension of space. And then whichever second dimension of time we are subject to, we would view as inherently different because we can't control it. And we would then view that as in the same way that we view time now for us, because we can't control it, and it's just special in that way.
Oh.
So I think, yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think you're strengthening my point. I really appreciate it. It'll make it easier for the audience to vote on my idea. Should I give my reason why I think that the so-called aliens are observers rather than integrated part of our society?
Stick to the episode, yeah.
Should I give that idea?
So we'll take this as Mackie's proposal.
Yeah.
This is the position you're taking for today's episode.
I am taking this position. Now, why I think that that if aliens are already amongst us, I say if, because I cannot say definitive yes. If I say that, then anyone can disprove me. So I'm going to stick with aliens would likely be observers, because I've been watching a series called Orville. A series made, directed, and I think produced by Seth MacFarlane, the person of Family Guy, if people don't know him.
Seth MacFarlane.
MacFarlane. I always get that confused. Thank you, Jotun. So he made the series, and he wanted to make it a lot more like philosophical, a lot more very closely related to Star Trek. And if you watch the series, it's actually incredibly interesting. Not the greatest at all ends, but they tackle some really interesting first encounter situations, because they go to every different cultures and they go to different planets, and they see how different planets evolve over time. And they physically cannot, and one of the rules of the exploration group is that they cannot interfere with society that is unable to do space travel, or they're unable to communicate to the greater beyond their planet. So they have to physically sit there and watch while like a family will go running around crying for help and that stuff, and they have to physically just say we can't do anything, because if we do, we end up altering that entire society's way of becoming what it needs to become to achieve space travel. But obviously, being a series, they do that. They interfere with the certain things, and the society has grown in a way that would kind of arc its original direction. So they're not necessarily they didn't focus on their current way of thinking, and they started looking beyond. They started progressing faster and understanding certain things a little bit easier that would likely take them quite a few centuries to get past. And I think that's where humanity's really been influenced in that way. How I'm touching that is that the gods in our Norse, Greek, Egyptian, every kind of god, I feel like they were at some stage these aliens, where they see this primitive species and they think, hey, we can do whatever we want to do, because they're so primitive that they probably won't even recall our interventions in this situation. And
yeah,
I believe that like Zeus, people used to worship Zeus quite a bit, and all of a sudden they stopped, probably because Zeus never came back down. But it just seemed like they were saying, okay, they're at a stage where they have enough fuel to progress to the stage where they need to do space travel, communication, and there's nothing more that we should do to interfere with their growth. Where prior to that, they were kind of like speeding up the process, kind of pushing the fast forward button in our slow development. And they came in and said, okay, here's a building. This is math science. Because if you look at most of the like lore behind that, these entities would always come from the sky above, either in flying vehicles, or they would kind of fly down. But I think that's like some type of tractor beam, where they were coming down at a very slow pace. And people, when we see like something really amazing, we overemphasize on its amazingness. We focus on like our picture in our mind saying, this guy, this god came down from the heavens and there was this giant glow behind him. It was clear that this was some higher being, where it was just like probably the lights from the saucer or flying vehicle that they used. So I feel like in those kind of senses they will intervene, and to cut it short to the point where now they don't feel like it's necessary to intervene anymore. I think they say that we're given the tools necessary for humanity to go beyond what is necessary, and there's no further greater intervention that is required of us.
Yeah.
That's my proposal.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for my answer for the Ramble Shrapnel episode, I mentioned a story or like a thought chain that was, let's say, a narrative that was made by Graham Hancock, talking about like a progression of a human-alien hybridization program going from the Middle Ages with fairies and fairy stories to the modern day. Would you like me to recap that?
Yeah, I think that's it's really. I kind of recap what my opinion was, so I feel like it's necessary for the audience who don't listen to our Ramble Shrapnel episodes, that they just feel like they can follow along.
Shame on you, audience. Go listen to that episode. Okay, so he says that in the Middle Ages, there was like contact with fairies, and they talked about these like mystical figures that would they're just weird occurrences with fairies that and the fair folk that happened in those days, such as what they called fairy circles, where fairies would dance in a circle, and if you happened to view them doing that in the middle of the day, then you would just disappear. So he makes an argument for the fairy circles being some kind of a teleportation ritual or technology. And if you think of the law of Arthur C. Clarke about every kind of magic that is, or something like any magic that is not, any technology that is not sufficiently known will appear as magic. I'm paraphrasing heavily, by the way, but that's where it goes basically. And so if you follow that reasoning, then it makes sense that this fairy circle, which is like twisting and stuff, can act as some kind of teleportation device, because we just don't understand how that magic works. And so if people viewed these fairy circles, then they would just disappear. And similarly, there was something called like fairy gates or fairy pathways, which was like a hedgerow on the side of the field that would have an archway, and if people walked down through the arch and into a path, then they would similarly disappear. And now you also have stories of people coming back after like what they feel was an afternoon or a few hours, and like the place where they were, I mean people that come back from this fairy pathway, the place where they return to doesn't look exactly like the place where they left. It looks like there are a few new buildings, or the field and features of the landscape had changed. And then lo and behold, they talk to some people inside the village that they always knew, which looks a little bit different. And the people inside the village will tell them, well, I don't actually know this a person by that name, but I do know that they lived like 30 years ago. Or I know their sons or something, like their daughters. But their daughter is like 50 now, not a child anymore. And so then these people would find out that, oh my gosh, I've been gone for like 60 years. But for me, it only felt like an hour passed. And so like these weird stories happen. And then Graham Hancock links that to abduction stories of nowadays, where people say like they would just come back in like a month will have passed. They'll wake up they'll go to bed one night, and then they remember some kind of dream episode where there were lights or something, and then they come back and a month has gone by, and they don't remember where that month disappeared to. And then as a lot of the time, these abductions or stories are like recurring episodes, and they'll have memories of dreams which kind of progress a dream narrative, and where from every dream which they view or remember as abduction events, they remember more, and the dream narrative itself expands. So then they get memories and flashbacks of basically a second life that they live with the aliens, where they have an alien spouse and they raise alien children with the alien spouse. And then it's gotten to the point at this stage now in the modern day where these abduction events with like spouses of the aliens, like the spouses are very attractive people, but there's something weird about them, like something in the uncanny valley that's a bit off-putting. And so he then says, okay, that is step 9 of 10 on the alien hybrid program. And back on step 2 in the Middle Ages, there were all these abduction event stories of aliens or fairies leaving behind a changeling inside the crib of a normal middle-aged family overnight and stealing the human baby away. And the changeling was a crude attempt at this alien hybrid program. And if you look up a bit of like stories of changelings on the internet, you'll see that all these changelings were meant to have been like these absolutely fugly, just like absolutely unattractive babies. Because most of the time we're like, oh, these babies are cute. They're like pudgy and squishy, and mums think that they smell super awesome. There's like something about the smell of newborn babies. But all the stories of changelings are horrible. It's like these are babies that are unsatisfied by anything. They're crying all the time. They're sickly. They puke all the time. And they're ugly as well. And now they're left to raise that ugly thing. So it's actually quite humorous. But he makes this like narrative progression of there was a hybrid program that started in the Middle Ages or beforehand. And now that hybrid program has progressed to the point where humans and aliens are kind of indistinguishable, except for the fact that there's still an uncanny valley feeling about the hybrids. And that's, for me, that's the most likely way in which aliens would already be amongst us, because it would have to be at a point where we don't realize that they're amongst us. But I think you can still make the assertion that they're not exactly people. And I don't think that they'd ever be fully able to recreate humans. So it makes sense to me that there would be something off-putting about them. Yeah. So that's how I think it would come about.
Well, it's quite an interesting idea behind it, because obviously aliens is obviously such a. I actually would like to hear your definition. I'll give. Obviously, I'm not the host, so I'm kind of hijacking the segment here. From my understanding, an alien is technically something that's from outer space. But when does it stop being an alien? Because, like in your statement there, is that they were initially replaced, and say that they reproduced on the planet Earth. Are they still technically aliens? Because obviously it's a weird concept, because why I say that is obviously if you think of plants, they're native to certain countries, but we call them alien plants because they are not native to a certain country, and they kind of destroy the environment that they're in, because the environment doesn't know how to cater or doesn't know how needs to adapt to the new invasion of this foreign plant. Now, is that the same kind of way of your thinking? Is that if it's an organism that came from space originally, even though it's like made its life on a planet, is it considered an alien forever, or is it considered an earthling at a certain stage of like generations?
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't matter how far they progress in the hybrid program. I don't think that they can ever fully get into our society, at least, and not be noticed if someone were to pay close enough attention. I think they could get by perfectly fine. And I don't know, like, there's no way of saying whether their civilization would be like, no, you're too much of an earthling to be part of us. I don't know. It might be it'll probably be a thing of like they just don't fit in anywhere then, because they're not human and they're definitely not alien either.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's why I was kind of asking the question because, in my opinion, yes, originally they were alien to us, but then why I say that is because there's some evidence in like Indian culture of the gods where at one stage after the battles that they claimed in this Hindu language, I believe it's Hindu, some of these god beings would come down to the planet and have babies. So they kind of integrated the hybrids in that sense. But in my opinion, that if they've now integrated into our society in that way, where we now having children, their children, and who knows, myself, Mackie, and Jotun may be some distant descendant of some, or have a bit of a blood in our bloodlines. Does that technically make us alien? Just because we have at one stage had one of our relatives had a woohoo with an alien. But in my opinion, we're not technically aliens once we've already started like reproducing on that planet, because we've grown up as an earthling. We treat Earth as a home. So does that mean that we are an earthling, or are we still technically an alien?
That's interesting. Well, this
Woohoo.
that actually kind of brings us to my second idea for the second part of this episode, which is taking the answer that you prepared for the original question of how they're among us already. Explain a scenario in which humans are actually the aliens, or an alien for your thing, that was put here by extraterrestrials, and the way in which aliens are already among us is that we are the aliens. Just explain a scenario of how humans could be the aliens living here, and like motivate for how it makes sense in the world that we know.
Well, okay, so that's a very interesting question. So to start off, the term alien is such a broad term. Why I say that is because what's alien, from what I understand, what alien is basically, is this familiar to me or is this not familiar to me? So the fact that if I go to a different country, I feel like I'm an alien because technically I'm in a new culture, new way of thinking. Obviously, people don't see me too much like an alien, but obviously, like now that I live in the UK, one of the first things people always say is that, "What's wrong with your accent?" I'm like, "It's English." They said, "No, something's wrong with your accent," and right there, I'm immediately feeling like an alien. So why I highlight is that because anything can be viewed as an alien, and in that sense, anything can also be, if everything is viewed as alien, nothing's viewed as alien. So. But that's going to a whole different can of beans that I don't want to quite open just yet. So it is an interesting way of thinking because how you worded that question made me also think of the possibility that Earth was, like we all know, it was inhabited by dinosaurs. Then something wiped out the dinosaurs. What if it was those aliens that came down to the planet and say, we need a new test site for our new organic organism that we want to encourage growth and see if they can possibly benefit us in any ways, perhaps maybe immunity to a certain disease or that kind of thing. So they flew past our little planet, and before humanity was even a thing, they said, this might be the perfect planet. It's got water, it's got everything that a growing organism needs. Let us start fresh. So they wiped out everything. Then they planted the seeds of humanity, which technically we are those aliens. And what was your second part of your question?
So it's how are we aliens, or how are we just like an extraterrestrial species that another extraterrestrial put here? So for now, my way of thinking about how it is with your scenario is that some kind of observer, extraterrestrial, because we're going with the human zoo hypothesis.
Yeah, 100% human zoo.
So it would have to have been something like 300,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Because that's when we see a record of the first modern humans in the archaeological record. That's Homo sapiens sapiens. Some alien species decided, you know what, I'm going to drop something from another world that we know, that we know very well. because it seems to fit in with all these Neanderthals and Homo
Oh,
erectus
100%.
and all of that. And I think that, they'd be able to get by over there. Like, nobody else would be able to realize that they're not actually from this place. And then they just like dumped us. Just like 5,000 different humans or breeding pairs so that there's enough genetic diversity. And then they just left us here to see what happens. I think that's how it would have come about.
Well, yeah, I have a slightly different view. So I go back to my whole dinosaur situation where humanity was like a test subject where they kind of planted the seeds, the organisms, after they wiped out the dinosaurs. Or maybe it was during that time, but I still think it might be beyond that time. And the organisms grow, and like I said, they were holding our hands, maybe integrating themselves in the society. By say integrate, I mean they are mixing their genetics into our genetics, because every like living organism has the need to reproduce. It's a natural thing that comes to us. And I think that on a really like drunk or bored evening of our observers, they feel like, hey, let's have a fun night where we just mess with the dum-dums. And then you get to, like, the scientists say, no, we must not interfere. And then obviously you can't control everyone in the society, and it's got a hive mind. But I still think that we were modified in that kind of way, where this external element came into our gene cycle, and we've all inherited some of their DNA, which helped us evolve in some ways a bit faster. But also, like I say, they're observing us. Perhaps they all come down to us and said, well, maybe we're like Rick and Morty. In the episode Rick and Morty, you know how Rick has that little battery that powers his car, and it's a whole mini-verse in the situation? Maybe we're like that, where they'll come down to us in these pretended costumes and use their swear symbol hands or swear language, where they swear at us, and we think it's their way of greeting us. We have zero idea. So again, I still feel like we are if they are amongst us, we are their test subjects, they observers, they entertainment, many other things. So we're not their equals in any ways until we've gotten to a certain stage where they can see us as helpful. We're like their child almost. I have the optimistic view that we are their child, that they look after us. Maybe that all those close encounters with meteorites, they like from a distance, they like just nudging that meteorite out of the way. And when we eventually get that kind of technology, they don't have to worry about it anymore. They can move on to the next stage. They say, okay, so they now have space lasers that they can shoot out these meteorites. We can progress to the next stage where maybe we will say hello to their many communication probes, where they gently checking out if there's any life, and then we can finally say hello to them. It's something that I hope is the more optimistic way of thinking.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of thinking. For my answer, I think that if we're the product of a hybrid program, then I think that actually makes a ton of sense, because archaeologically speaking now, we know that modern Homo sapiens sapiens bred with Homo neanderthalensis.
Mm-hmm.
Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthalensis sapiens. Okay. And that's just because we weren't so far away from them in the genetic plane. So there's actually a very plausible argument that could be made for an extraterrestrial like intervention being the reasons why the normal spear chucker kind of stone tool wielding hominins were able to make the cognitive leap to developing culture and speech and all of those wonderful things that we associate with being a human being. There could be an argument to be made for that. Now, I don't necessarily believe that, but I think that there are quite a few parallels inside the archaeological record that you could associate there. Just speaking more expansively on all of life on Earth, I think that there almost already is evidence of like kind of the panspermia idea, but I think like multiple different panspermia events happening inside of Earth. because like I think there's literally 40 different kinds of ways in which eyesight and photoreception has developed inside of Earth already. Like octopodes and cephalopods have a different mechanism by which they see. Shrimps, especially the mantis shrimp, that can see like 30 different colors or whatever. No, they've got like 16 or 12 different photoreceptor cells in their eyes. Their eyes develop completely independently from us. And I wouldn't be surprised if insects also developed some kind of different mechanism for seeing. And so just because of that, I would say that it could be that there was panspermia happening. But otherwise, it's actually not really that, because evolution tends towards certain kinds of things, because there are only a limited amount of waveforms inside of physics that can be utilized for any kind of sensory experience. That's like light, it's sound. Light has like, let's say, 10 different spectra. And so that provides a lot of variability in which light can be photoreceived by some kind of organ. Then with sound, you could make a plausible argument for the different wavelengths and only being attuned to a higher or a lower kind of wavelength, or having a kind of broad spectrum. And otherwise, it makes sense that, like, just breaking down our own five senses, like molecules float around from the source of those molecules, which would be something physical, like a type of matter. And so that's what our noses were developed to sense. And touch is just our sense of actual physical matter.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the fifth one? Taste. And taste is just the metabolic sensory organ for those same molecules that are associated with smell and matter as well. But that's like more of a combinatory one. So you can kind of you can easily imagine a different kind of sense which combines sight and smell, or sound and sight. Or I guess not really. It would have to be sound and sight, not sight and smell, because those sight and sound are waveforms in physics, whereas smell and taste and touch have to do with matter. So like there are different ways in which you can combine those, but it seems as if those are the only kinds of senses that we can have. So I guess you could make an argument for why it's not necessarily extraterrestrial, because evolution only has so many things to work with. Does that make sense?
It does. It's quite an interesting way of thinking, I won't lie. So are you also on the kind of side that you think that aliens, well, what do you think? So you mentioned the whole point of like aliens have kind of made hybrid versions of us.
Yeah.
I feel like both our ideas are quite closely linked. But when do you think that kind of started? When do you think that hibernation when did they feel like it was time? Do you think they just like came by and saw that we were already at a certain stage and decided that this is the time? Or do you think that it was just by chance?
I think it would, granted we're taking that this scenario happened, I would definitely say that it was fully 100% planned, because
I agree.
It would have to be planned, because if you seed some kind of genetic material in like the eukaryote and prokaryote bacterial stage of the development of life, then the intermingling of that would have been so mixed and established that you wouldn't have the variability later down the line of mammals on the evolutionary plane, where you would actually be able to see that there's some kind of a difference in the mechanisms like eyesight or sound or smell or anything like that. So it would have to have been something like within the last ice age or whatever, some kind of massive climactic epoch. So like let's say the last 500,000 years, because that's still that's still not far enough down in time for genetic admixture to have been so well established that things can no longer be told apart. You could even make a solid argument for saying that that's the difference between mammals and birds and dinosaurs in general, because birds are dinosaurs. You could say that we're distinct enough that, there's no breeding happening over there. Clearly different.
Well,
yeah.
that brings into the whole point of like genetic modification, because at one stage humanity are gonna delve way into it, possibly a future episode where we're gonna delve into genetic modification, where we put favorable qualities and remove unfavorable qualities. We already have started doing that at a certain degree of already, and that's also another thing that the aliens could have done to us. That's why I touched briefly on the fact that aliens might be using us as a way to solve or grow their society. Why I say solve is because maybe there's some disease that they're just sick and tired of, and they need a testing ground. They need a way to kind of test the solution or genetic modification without destroying their society. So I feel like in a way humanity could just be incubating into the appropriate test guinea pigs, where we are hopefully their solution, which they're then gonna hopefully not harvest us, but rather try to integrate with us. Another way to think of it.
No, that's a good way of thinking of it.
I'm trying to be optimistic this episode, okay?
No, that's definitely a nice way of thinking about it. It's nice to think that there's a purpose behind why this program would have happened.
Alternatively, we could just be in a giant slaughterhouse version of like a pig slaughterhouse or that kind of thing, where we're just just plumping ourselves up because Americans are already ahead of us in certain degrees. I'm not sure. I know this is a bit of diversion, but I've been watching some TikTok cooking episodes. Just a few, just because some of them caught my attention. And this one American TikToker who makes food just wants everything she makes feels like I'm physically getting a heart attack by just watching her make this food. Oh my gosh.
You see the grease bubbling and sizzling, and you're just like, oh my gosh, that goes inside people? What's going on?
I kid you not. I'll share this TikTok video with you. It is absolutely insane. I'll just touch on one, where this person gets a slice of bread, and I think she puts like 16 slabs of different types of cheese. So like American cheese, and it's like those processed cheeses. And she put those 16 slabs right on top of each other, and then another piece of bread. Then she dips the entire sandwich in deep fried dough, so the batter. So it's completely covered in batter. And then she covers it in instant dry noodle mix. So it's now covered in this dough, and it's now got an outside exterior of an instant noodle mix, where then they proceed to deep fry this bad boy. This whole thing is a complete, like, I can't fathom why someone would want to eat this thing. But that's why
triple bypass waiting to happen.
I promise you just watch this and you like see this person. She's not in any way an inspiration of how to cook video situation. But why I touch on that is that they might be just waiting for us to plump ourselves up to the appropriate tenderness and right amount of meat. And yeah, they're just gonna say it's time to eat, guys, and they come down and just start. Maybe they hunt us down because they want to get that thrill of the hunt situation. Maybe they could just to harvest us, and that's the more scary way of thinking it.
Well, it would kind of be inevitable, like a foregone conclusion, because any civilization that becomes sufficiently advanced enough will want to do less and less work and less labor. Mm-hmm. And that would mean that they eventually do plump and fatten up. So
100%.
It's a sure thing, just like seed different galaxies and planets with some genetic material so that you can come harvest them in 1,000,000 years.
Yeah, and you can have that big brand or a sticker on the package stating all naturally grown, X amount of years grown society. Be warned, this is an American version, so a lot of grease may be involved, and then here's the South African version, a lot of meat can be involved, and here's the Chinese, a very organic way of eating food. Yeah,
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. But okay, everyone, that was our episode for today. Let us know whose original idea you think makes more sense, and tell us how do you think humans would be living among us? I mean, not humans, aliens would be living among us already. Do you think it would be something like Men in Black, or I don't know, something else? And which idea of the later part of the episode, of us being the aliens, do you think was more interesting? And how do you think we could be the aliens? Mackie, I kind of forgot to touch up on this in the beginning of the episode, but where exactly can we be found, and how can people interact with us? How can they let us know about this? Their answers.
So you guys know that if you are not alien, you are already part of this. But for all those future alien people who don't quite know how to really get in touch with us, the easiest and best way is through our Discord. We have a Ramble Shamble Discord. If you don't have a very new account and don't have a profile pic, then it will be difficult for you to join, because we do have those minor restrictions, because there are those spam bots out there. But if you do have an existing account, like I say, 2 weeks old, and have a thumbnail of any kind, it could be your best friend, it could be a picture of your dog, we don't really mind. It's a thumbnail, it really does not matter in the world of Discord. You can come join us and chat with us, share your ideas, give us your answers to your question. And you can also find us on almost every other podcasting platform: Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. And you're also free to speak to us through YouTube. We won't communicate as freely, but we'll definitely respond. We'll respond to your messages and possibly learn from them. And guys, again, if you've listened to or see a few of our Ramble Shamble episodes, you might think that we only talk about future, or we only talk about a certain topic. That is not the case. If you go through our whole topic range, we cover an array of topics. We just love the world of space and future and aliens, but we might touch on it every now and again because there's so much to talk about. And guys, don't forget, we release a new video every Thursday. If we don't release the video, we'll try our very best to communicate that to you. So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. You can also listen to shorter versions called Ramble Shamble, and we hope to see you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye!